welcome to Relationships and Astrology, and I'm Margaret in Dublin.
I'm Armand Diaz in New York.
So today, Armand, we're talking about the solar eclipse, which is on February 26th. And of course, this is the second and last eclipse of this current season. So it kind of closes off really the past few weeks, which have been kind of had their own little challenges, so to say the least.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how people are feeling in their relationships, because of course, it's one thing to deal with them on our own, but then when we're in a relationship or even with family members, with friends, with work colleagues, it really gets kind of, these energies get amplified. So there's been a lot of watery energies around, and now here's an eclipse in water in Pisces. What do you think of it?
Well, yeah, it's a watery, emotional type of energy. But at the same day, we have Mars conjunct Uranus in Aries, which is a sort of electrical energy. And you know how well electricity and water get together. It really could be a very tense time in its own way. I think a new moon solar eclipse is always going to feel a little bit more inward than outward. Although, with Mars getting to oppose Jupiter the very next day, I think it's going to get out much faster than we might expect. It's going to be almost like an alarm clock type of energy. I think that, coming into the eclipse a few days beforehand, certainly from Wednesday when Mars squares Pluto onwards into the eclipse, I think that there's liable to be a lot of tensions bubbling around, and it's important that we not project this onto the partner. It's important that we not take too much of it into ourselves. Some of this stuff is just, junk that's bouncing around the collective, that's our energy too, but it's our collective energy. It's not our personal energy, and it's good to sort of have that perspective.
Yes, particularly with an eclipse in Pisces, because Pisces, of course, opens things, dissolves things. It's a very, at its highest, it's a very spiritual energy, but it really is. It's a little bit like putting a sugar cube in water. It just dissolves everything. So our hearts are probably more open. So we may feel a little more vulnerable. So it's very important to be gentle with ourselves. And just to say a little bit about the solar eclipse, that it's really, astronomically, of course, the moon passes between the Earth and the sun. So, it's important also maybe to know if you live within an area where the eclipse is very visible. And this is an annular eclipse, so there's still a little bit of light around, so the sun doesn't go completely dark. It may impact you a little bit more, as well as, of course, if it aspects your chart in any way. So for a while, for a short period of time, it's like the light goes out, the light of consciousness. So our ego really is covered up, and then we're left with our emotions, which also are hidden from view. So there is that sense of really not knowing where we are. It's almost like a little bit being in limbo, and particularly an eclipse in Pisces. There may be a feeling of like, where am I? Am I between worlds? So grounding is very important, because otherwise we could be kind of spinning off into the ether, and it may be hard to anchor back in ourselves and in our bodies.
And with so much energy in the air in other directions, the Mars-Uranus thing, there's almost like that, the urge to act is very strong, and it's probably not the best time to act because we're not so clear on things. And that really is a challenge. That really is a challenge. It is really, an eclipse, like any new moon, is a time of endings and beginnings. In Pisces, it is all the more so. It's quite strong in that respect. But it is the type of thing that is liable to be very nebulous while it's happening. It's similar to like when you go to sleep in a way. You end one day and you begin the next, and yet during the time when you're out, who knows? Consciousness doesn't have a great sense of what happens when you're unconscious. And there's dreams, of course.
Yeah, it's probably a good time to look at dreams and to, and of course, particularly if people are in intimate relationships, a lot of dreams can come up about each other. So to notice what the dreams are about and where they're kind of maybe guiding or leading the relationship to, or how they describe the relationship. And also, as we mentioned in our video about the transits of this week, to really consider, what are our dreams about our relationship? Where would we like to go? What are our hopes? And, not to also get too disillusioned though, because, you know, during this time it's very easy, particularly with an eclipse, to get disillusioned. So to kind of keep that balance between reality and dreams and think, okay, these are our dreams, and maybe, you know, in the weeks and months to come, we can work on them. And even if they haven't all been fulfilled, it's still nice to have them there, sort of, you know, kind of tucked away at the back of our minds.
And this eclipse, 100%, 100%. This eclipse, it begins a week. You know, the sun is going to go on to hit Neptune. Mercury is going to meet Neptune. Venus is going to station to retrograde. So, you know, there is this sort of nebulous energy about things. And, you know, we can look at our dreams. We can look at what's going on and try to look at the big picture and sort of imagine for the future. But we have to be careful that, you know, we don't sort of make heroes and demons out of ordinary folk, that we don't over exaggerate, that, you know, that the little bit of doubt doesn't become paranoia, that the little bit of hope doesn't become a grand dream, and we don't start spinning melodramas out of this too. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky, and it's not, as you said, it's not easy to step back and really see things clearly.
You know, I think probably a kind of something to go back to during these very intense Piscean energies, particularly with an eclipse, is always the concept of unconditional love. So that if we get lost in the idealizing, or if we get lost in the demonizing, if we can actually just pull our heart right back into unconditional love, that can be a great starting point and a great centering point, both for ourselves and others, and brings us into that whole realm of spiritual connections, which are really a little bit different than ego-based connections, which of course are based on, you know, what do I need from you and what can I get from you, what can you give me, into, you know, what can I offer, and, you know, how can I be of service, which doesn't mean being a martyr, and it doesn't mean being a victim. It really means standing our own ground and yet opening our hearts. So this eclipse could potentially be a very big opening, heart opening. And of course, the first one, which was in Leo, was also about heart opening. So we've now moved from Leo to Pisces, which is really around the emotional aspects of the heart and the feeling base. So I think there is a lot that could start from this, particularly with the Mars, Uranus, that it could be a new beginning in terms of how we want to interact and how we want to be in relationship, and also whether our relationship has a spiritual foundation or not. And of course, that's not for everyone, but if somebody does want a soul connection, then this might be a really good time to assess, is this what I have with my significant other? And if not, can we create it? Or if not, maybe you know, do I want that going forward?
It's full of potential and it's full of pitfalls. You know, it really can be a great time of beginning. It can be a great time of realignment, a very heart, as you said, very heart-oriented type of time, a time of spirituality. It can also, you know, it can also get a little contaminated with ego and, you know, the little sugar crystal that you drop into the water, and all of a sudden everything sort of freezes up, type of thing. There can be a lot of different outcomes, and it's going to be a little tricky. And I think sometimes, you know, maybe granting yourself a little bit of space and maybe a little time to sort of, you know, back away or, you know, take a nap is not the end of the world with this particular eclipse.
And also to remember, the creative arts are great for Piscean energy, making music, listening to music, being by water, painting, you know, just doing things that are great, even just going to an art gallery and looking at beautiful paintings, or going around looking at beautiful buildings, whatever you enjoy. But creativity, really, there's a lot of inspiration. So get some paper out, write a poem, do something, you know, that's inspirational at this time, can really help.
Sounds like a plan, Margaret.
So we will meet again at our next, in fact, it'll be our next transits for the week. So I hope everybody has a very interesting solar eclipse, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.